Hey folks, thanks very much for joining our Monday Mindshare, and what a treat we've got today. This is the second time we've had Debbie on the show. Debbie Collingwood, how are you doing there? Welcome back.
Hi, thanks. I'm doing good.
So you've just flown into to LA or to Long Beach, or where are you based?
LA.
Okay, well, awesome. Well, we got a treat today, folks. Debbie's 24 hours thereabouts away from, or maybe I guess it's 18 hours. You're on the West Coast, from starting her Catalina to basically California to the mainland, cross-channel swim. And how you feeling there?
Down, the nerves kick in every once in a while, then they go away, but they're still there, which I think is a good thing.
It's funny, huh? How it doesn't matter how long the race is, the butterflies keep flying, huh? It's always the case.
Yeah. No matter how many times I've done this, yeah, they're still there.
So, folks, if you hadn't had a chance, I'll make sure I put the link up. We had a show with Debbie when she swam the English Channel. And actually, you went on after that, not long after that. I think you swam in New York there. Is that right?
That's right, around Manhattan. They call it the 20 Bridges swim.
Okay. And what I found fascinating with this, maybe it's just the upmanship in the US that always happens, but this, as I understand it, it's 1 mile longer than the English Channel or something. Is that right? Or it depends on where you land, I guess.
Yeah, how long is a piece of string? It really depends. The English Channel, everyone asks me how long it is. Well, you can't really distance to it, because if you're get to do it in a straight shot, which only really fast swimmers do, it's probably 2/3 of what a slower swimmer would swim. So
right.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting, and it just so happened, we at SFuels, obviously we took the sponsorship for the Catalina Ultra running series, and then Debbie reached out to me and just said, hey, I'm going to be over there in a few weeks on the cross-channel swim, and here we are. But interesting, I was looking at some of the history of this race. It's like 100 years ago when the Wrigley family, of course, took ownership, if you will, of the island, and I think they offered a New York world champion swimmer lady $5,000 to swim the channel, and within a short amount of time, that $5,000 became $25,000 up for grabs. And I think the first swim started in January of 1927. And at that time, it was regarded as a 22, 23-mile swim. So it was actually called the Wrigley Ocean Marathon because it's very close to 26 miles. I just can't imagine swimming a marathon, because running it is just as tough. So we're going to enjoy talking to you about this. But you haven't tried this before? This is your first attempt?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, back then there was 102 swimmers, 15 of which were women. Do you know what the makeup is for this week, or of the swimmers?
So when I actually swim, it's just me. It's very similar to the English Channel in the sense that I hire a pilot and I go out with my pilot. Whether or not there might be other boats going out at the same time, I don't know. But yeah, it's me in the water. Merrick will be kayaking, thankfully, because we do this at night. We do it at night, which is that's really the challenging part for me right now, is it's primarily overnight, so in the dark.
Oh man. So I was looking at some of the records, and like you rightly said, how long is a piece of string? There's a lot of variables here, but I was seeing here 2018 there was a Hank Wise 755, Grace Vanderbilt 727, Pete Husfeld in 92 and 737, and then a Penny Lee Dean, who I believe has written a book on this whole thing, 715 in 1976. Now, again, channels, currents, temperatures, winds, there's a lot of factors here. I get it. But one of the interesting things about your sport is that, unlike a lot of other sports, and particularly endurance sport, there's been a lot of tech come into, say, triathlon and the bike, particularly, and recently on running, of course, with super shoes. But you guys you can't even use wetsuits. You can't use anything, right?
Not even a watch.
Not even a watch. I didn't realize that. Okay, so you can't even like measure your heart rate. Okay. Yeah, so it's just, you and the elements. And maybe for a second though, you can talk a little bit on, I see some of these photos from off the web on, some of the recent attempts over the past few months. They've put the white grease on. What actually is that?
The white is really it's zinc oxide diaper rash cream for lack of a better term. That is, for the most part, it's sun protection. Sunscreen just doesn't cut it in these things. It just comes off. And so the zinc is really the only way to protect from the sun. If you're out, in some cases, 12, 15 hours in really hot temperature, it does offer the skin a little bit of protection from the salt water as well. We used to think that it kept you warm. It doesn't. They've proven that that's not the case anymore. Right. It can help if if there's jellyfish stings. They don't sting quite as badly. But that's and chafing, to help with bathing suit, which is not fun. So yeah, it's just really for skin protection.
Why did you have your pilot? And we're going to talk a lot more about the race in a second, but why did you select to, if it's a pilot and it's only you, to go through the night versus through the day?
That's the pretty standard procedure for this swim. And my understanding, it's just, there can be some pretty vicious winds around here that kick up during the day, convection. I always, when I'm swimming at home around Vancouver, when we start early in the morning, you get nice, beautiful, glassy conditions. As soon as the sun pokes its head up, things start to stir up a little bit. So it's just really, it's because of the conditions, it just makes conditions more manageable.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, obviously, you and the team there are studying the weather probably every 15 minutes. But I was just checking out. So Tuesday wind again. I'm just seeing some content on the net. It may be accurate or inaccurate, but talking about 14, 15, 16 knots in the evening. Is that right?
Yeah, little. I've sent a message to my pilot just there saying, hey, what are your thoughts on the conditions for tomorrow? I think compared to a couple of days ago when we were first looking, I think they've simmered down a little bit, but yeah.
So that's 3 feet. I mean, it's suggesting 3 feet. I guess that's like swells. What's typically the ceiling where you'd say, you know what, we're going to find a new date to do this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I really don't get a whole lot of say, in that. That's usually the pilot gets the final say on conditions. Swimming, because I swim around Vancouver where the conditions are very, they change very quickly, very easily. I'm actually fairly used to challenging conditions.
Okay.
I rarely get a calm swim, which is a good thing. I had one a couple of weeks ago. It was actually a little bit harder mentally than when the conditions are challenging. So, so far I haven't heard, I haven't had a message from the pilot saying, yeah, we're pushing it for a day. And I think this swim does not get blown out in the same way that the English Channel typically, some people, they call it the Dover coaster for a reason. You get to Dover and you're just riding this roller coaster of, are we going, aren't we going? And this one is pretty solid.
Pretty consistent. Okay. And then temperature wise, looks like just historically a range like this time of the year, somewhere between the, I guess, low 60s to early 70s, I guess is what I'm seeing Fahrenheit. Are you Celsius or Fahrenheit there?
That's me trying to do my quick
math. No, that's all right. I guess it's like high teens to low 20s, right?
That's pretty cool for me.
Yeah, I was going to say, so Vancouver, what's typical this time of the year?
This time of year in Vancouver, the temperatures are actually dropping fairly rapidly. Last time I went out, it was about 15, 16. I think we've seen a little bit of a bump back up towards 18, but 18 is typically our max. Very rarely do we reach 20.
Okay. Yeah. So you're in good shape there, I guess. Well, this is awesome. So let's tell us a little bit about training coming into this crossing. I mean, what kind of mileage a week would it typically be putting in for a 20, 22, 23 mile race like this?
Yeah, I still do. The majority of my swimming is pool based. Like you still want to try and work on some speed and technique. So I tend to work more on time than distance because,
Right.
like we said, we don't know. The distance thing is not necessarily a factor. Well, it is a factor, but it's hard to calculate. So I'm in the
Gotcha.
pool up to 2 hours a day, sometimes twice a day, and then open water, up to 4 or 5, even 6 hours. My coach had me doing not. I did a lot of longer swims last year for the English Channel. Peak week for a swim like this will have 2 back-to-back 4 to 6 hour swims, open water.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's time consuming.
Yeah. And do you
Yeah.
like in obviously pool swimming and even in triathlon, there would be the adoption of like paddles quite a bit. I mean, in triathlon, less so fins, but certainly paddles. Is
Yep.
paddle shoulder strength, and is that a common part of the training routine?
Yeah, pretty common. Also, paddles also are really important for technique, particularly the paddles that I use. If you don't use proper technique, you lose the paddle really easily.
Right.
Like they're
Yeah.
not actually attached
Yeah.
attached by my thumb, not actually attached to my hand. So that's one of the reasons. Yeah, fins. I When I do kick sets, I use fins because I'm a terrible kicker. I actually had a broken foot all winter, so
Oh, really?
yeah, but I don't. Kicking is really low rate of return investment in
Yeah.
open water.
Right.
It
Right.
it uses a whole lot more energy than you get out of it. I save my kick for when I get stuck, which happens
Yeah.
around Vancouver quite frequently. I don't think it will on this one, but
Right.
it's more for balance and
Yeah.
yeah,
Keeping the body in the right position. Yeah.
yeah.
So, like for fueling, of course, one of the not intentional, but typically what happens, of course, with when you dial down carbohydrate consumption is you begin to shed weight. And in your game, you want to actually hold some weight for the thermal protection, right? So how's that played out for you just as you've over the years kind of moved across to this more lower carb, right fuel, right time approach?
Yeah, luckily for me, maintaining weight has never been a challenge. um, yeah, and I would say actually for me the biggest challenge fueling it's and I talked about this with my other interview. It's that horizontalness,
Yeah,
for
right.
12, 16 hours. Things just don't want to
Go
stay
down.
down.
Right.
Go down, stay down. And so
Yeah.
what I end up having to do is really counterintuitively dial down the amount of fluid that I'm taking. You still do lose fluid when you swim. You still can get dehydrated, but it is a factor just in that being horizontal for so long. So yeah, I have to tweak how much water I mix in with things.
Yeah.
And I've got my phone propped up on the bottle that I use for training, and it's hard to see, but I've got lines on my
Okay.
bottle here. And so those little there's 4. I actually have 4 servings, 4 feeds in this
I
bottle.
see.
That's We've got 2 game plans for the swim. That's sort of our backup plan, but the other I'll use more what I used in the channel, which is just a small bottle that I can chuck in. I don't have to squeeze. Yeah.
And it's all fluid, Debbie, or at some point in that, do you feel like chewing on something or?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's really it almost just comes down to what I actually feel like having in my
Right.
mouth. I'm not a great chewer when
Yeah.
it comes to, even back in the day when I was able to do more running, it would take me hours before I actually felt like I wanted to chew something. So I'll have like 10 peaches just to
Okay.
switch it up for that mouth feel.
Yeah.
The
Right.
water do a number on your mouth. So it's really, yeah, a challenge. Like I've got the gel race. I'll have some of that ready to go just to switch it up a little bit, but
Right.
also jelly babies are easy to chew, and the good jelly babies.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right. I think I talked to you about this last time, but like the kind of one of the unique things that I think people who don't participate in a sport like this doesn't come to mind, and that is, again, in running or biking, you can still eat and still be going forward, but in your sport, you can't afford just to kind of stop as such because of the currents, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that was, I'd heard about that. I'd been told about it, in the channel, but they're not kidding when you say you got to do it as fast as you can. I got my feeds down to 20 seconds, which compared to some other swimmers is still a long time. I think Andy Donaldson was doing, he literally was doing his feeds in one stroke.
Oh, wow.
Just rolling on his back. If you want to see something impressive, Google Andy Donaldson channel feed. 20 seconds. Yeah. I'm not as worried about losing distance on this one as I was in the English Channel, because we had a 10-meter line attached to my feed bottle, and in 5 seconds I'd be at the end of the 10-meter line, and then you start getting your wrist slapped a little bit by the observer because you're potentially being pulled.
Right.
But that's fast the currents move there.
Wow. The way that your swim is from Avalon, from the island back to the mainland, is there any current general direction that's typical for that channel part of the
No, and I've looked at previous and recent tracker maps. It's a pretty good straight shot. I think what the difference between this channel and the English Channel, for example, is they get surface current, which can be unpredictable, which is actually what I'm used to. Where I swim Salish Sea, you never know what's going to happen. Right. We go out and you're guessing pretty much every time. I can pull off a 16-minute kilometer in the ocean and then get stuck in a 55-minute kilometer, half an hour later. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, hey, let's fast forward to Tuesday afternoon. Maybe you can just walk us through what happens between lunchtime and midnight, as I understand is race start or thereabouts. What typically happens in the day in the life of a ocean swimmer?
Yeah, so I'll sort of try to pretend that lunchtime tomorrow is when I'm going to bed. I'll have my biggest sort of meal then. Even when I'm not doing long swims, I don't like to swim on a full stomach. Like I need to have an empty stomach. So I'll sort of stop eating. I'll maybe try to sleep, but we all know how well that happens before and
good
but
luck
it will
with
really
that.
Yeah, exactly. It'll just be relaxing. Like I'll still keep hydrating, obviously, but we won't go out doing anything. It's still fairly warm here.
Yeah.
So last thing I want to do is get a sunburn or get dehydrated. So I'll just chill in our the condo that we've got and sort of pretend it's nighttime, even though I know I won't.
Are you on the island now, or are you?
No.
How are you getting over to the island? Or
so we're staying on the mainland, and I'll meet my pilot hour, 2 hours before start time, and we'll go over on the boat, which is for some people a factor. If you're prone to seasickness, some people do get sick for the start. Thankfully, I've never gotten seasick, but I'm prepared with seasickness pills just in case. So we'll head over, and then it's final, getting the white grease on, getting prepped, and then I'll jump off the boat into the darkness.
Wow. Yeah. And so being a midnight swim or start of a swim, and like you said, most of the race is through the night. I think you and I had talked about this once before, and I'm not sure which way you landed, but historically or for this race, caffeine is something that you play with or tend not to?
Yeah, I will. I enjoy my caffeine, but yeah, I'll definitely follow. I'll use the primed to start with, and even though it is overnight when I would normally be sleeping, like the body it somehow knows, right? It knows what to do. It knows that this is what I'm doing. My channel swim started at 2 a.m. I was definitely jet lagged for that swim, so I had all sorts of sleep challenges going on. So no, I'll probably not do too much with caffeine during the day tomorrow, like in the
Right.
morning,
Right.
to not have that much, I don't need that much stimulation going on.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, you got enough adrenaline floating around, you'll be
Yeah,
fine.
sure.
And then like race start or pre-race, like that hour before, you said you don't like to start with anything in your stomach. So what is basically sipping on something just to probably just
Yeah,
to deal with the nerves more than anything else.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I've got, I'll have a bar with me just in case I feel like it.
Right.
It is a fine balance. Sometimes you do want something in your stomach, but it's not typically what I do.
Yeah.
Swimmers are, we're early morning people for the most part, and most of us, it's a shot or two of espresso, and in the pool we go.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Right.
that's pretty much what I do.
Right.
So
Cool. So, and then what is the typical, like, is it a half an hour, 1 hour? Like, what is the frequency between fueling for like this distance of an ocean swim?
yeah, I do 30 minutes
Okay.
every 30. Yeah, if I do it any more frequently, it's just too much stopping, and
Right.
if I do it any longer, then it's just too hard to get it in. So half an hour seems to work really well for me. And I do about 150 mils I dropped it down. It was 200 mil. I'm doing 150. It just makes it that much easier to get it in
Hold
and
down.
not
Yeah.
wash around my gut too much. Yeah.
Gotcha. Any, again, it's just always hard to know, but just like any sense of you think this is a 20, 30 hour exercise? Like any sense on that?
Gosh, I hope it's not a 20, 30 hour exercise.
I wouldn't have a clue. So,
The window I'm sort of playing with right now is like best case. I think for me, best case time would be 11 hours. Challenging day would be more around 16. My channel swim was 14 and a half. I had honestly the best conditions of the day last year when I swam my channel. So that plays into it. But my channel window is 12 to 16 hours. That's what I was sort of thinking. So I was smack dab in the middle. So I'm hoping for around 13 to 14. That would be my ideal time, but I'm prepared for 16. So
okay. Yeah, that's fascinating. Now, last time we chatted, we were talking, I thought was almost the most interesting part of it all was what the dickens do you think about for 16 hours? So
yeah.
now by the way, can you have underwater headphones on races like this or not? Not
Nope.
allowed. Yeah. So I
It's
didn't even know how you remember that many songs. So what's the plan here?
So this is one of the most common questions. The other one when I talk to kids is how do you go to the bathroom? But the what do I think about? So particularly when conditions are calm, I can actually lose the plot a little bit and I drift off, and that's not necessarily what I want to do. So my strategy for the English Channel, I wear a watch when I train so I can keep track of things, but you're not allowed to on official swims. So I really wanted a strategy where I was able to sort of keep track of how much time was passing. And I decided, and it worked really well. I worked in half-hour chunks, knowing that that's when my feeds were. So for the first half hour, I thought of things that began with the letter A. Second half hour, letter B.
Right.
So I got to Z, it was 13 hours. And then I just started again. The first half of the alphabet was more interesting than the second half, I'll tell you.
Until you got to S for SFuels, right? And then you were good for a couple of hours, right?
Yeah, I had to adapt my strategy a little bit when I got U and Z, but that's my strategy for the mental piece. And it worked really well.
Can the pilot put any kind of signs on the side of songs or anything like that of his boat? Or
I don't know if they have rules about that. I do know when I swam the English Channel, when the sun came up, my pilot did play "Here Comes the Sun" by the
that's
Beatles,
cool.
which was it was a lovely little surprise. But yeah, you really get used to just being alone in the water and listening to the water, and it's one of the biggest challenges, but it's also one of the beautiful things about it. And I never train listening to music for that purpose. It's not something I want to get used to. Even if I'm hiking, I'm a cross country skier. If I go for walks, I don't listen to music, so I don't get in that relying
exactly
on it.
right.
So
You nailed it. That's for a lot of
yeah,
athletes. I think it's the same thing. You're spot on.
yeah,
Hey, and
yeah.
then in the English Channel, you talked about the number of stings and the things in the water. We went across to the Catalina Ultra Race March, I think it was, and on the way over, there were these schools of dolphins. And it's just
Yeah.
like beautiful diving in and out, and it's magic. But is it a channel that typically has a lot of jellyfish or not, or do you know that?
I've heard both. I've heard no, but then I've also heard that yes, there are. And my stings on the English Channel happened at night. Had no idea they were there. Just put my hand on a jellyfish, and that was that. I've never been stung elsewhere. That was the only time. So I don't know, to be
Yeah,
honest.
right.
Yeah.
Ouch. Yeah. So, and then the last question, obviously, is what's the typical after event first meal? What does that consist of?
Well, so last year after the channel, my after meal didn't happen for almost 24 hours. I just couldn't handle food.
Couldn't eat.
Um, couldn't eat, which is pretty typical for me. But it was also the salt water, like I said, plays an absolute number on your mouth. It's a thing that's called salt mouth. And the only way I can describe it is like chewing on batteries. It's really unpleasant. I tried to eat even the most bland, like I'm talking plain pasta with nothing on it. Couldn't eat it.
Oh wow.
So when the time comes that I feel like eating, it'll probably be burger fries.
with passion. Yeah, I bet.
Yeah,
I bet.
yeah, but we'll see. This is not quite the salinity is different than English Channel. Is very salty.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, it's just awesome talking to you again, and I was thrilled when you sent us the note and said, "Hey, this is coming up," and it's just thanks for the opportunity to have a chat with you. And
Yeah.
I assume the pilot's going to have a camera on board there somewhere to take a few shots, and we'd love to see those at some point.
Well, and anyone who follows me on social media knows that when I'm swimming, I have amazing photographs from my kayaker he's kayaking with me on this. So it's actually as much of an event for him as in fact, I think he might be feeling worse at the end of it than me. His goal is to kayak the entire time. I do have a backup kayaker on the boat. But because it's at night, he obviously, the photography opportunities aren't as great, which I'm sure he'll still find ways around.
I guess the last 5 hours or 4 hours or so, there's probably a bit of light starts to come up, right?
Yeah.
Well, all the very best and be safe. We'll be thinking of you, and can't wait to just see how it all goes and hear about it.
Thanks so much, Leighton.
All right. Thanks again, Debbie. Good to talk to you. Thanks, folks, for joining our Monday Mind Share, and we'll catch up next week. Thanks.